The champagne was still cold in my hand when my phone rang, shattering what should have been the most peaceful moment of my life. My son's voice came through slick and heavy, the kind of entitlement you get when someone's never had to sweat for anything. 24 hours later, I was standing in my own foyer, watching a parade of strangers track sand across my Italian marble floors like they owned the deed. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. I read every comment, I really do. Let me back up to how this delicious mess started. 3 months ago, I sold Sterling Marketing Solutions, the company I built from nothing over 30 years. The buyers wired $2.8 million in cash. After taxes and a lot of signatures, I finally had enough to do exactly what I wanted: buy my dream beach house and vanish from the corporate rat race once and for all. I had pictured it 1,000 times during those brutal 18-hour days. The quiet, the salt air, the way the horizon softens your heartbeat without asking permission. The house was everything I'd fantasized about. 6,000 square feet of weathered cedar and glass, perched on the dunes of the Outer Banks, with panoramic ocean views, and enough room to host my entire extended family for holidays I'd been too busy to enjoy for decades. The kind of place where the windows hum at night and the whitecaps wink at you like old friends. I'd been there exactly 8 hours when my son Brandon called. No, congratulations on your retirement, Mom. No, the house looks amazing. Just straight to business, like he was phoning a receptionist. Mom, we need you to move to the guest room upstairs, he said. Melissa's whole family is flying in tomorrow for a 2-week vacation. Her parents, her sister's family, her brother, and his girlfriend. That's 11 people total. I actually laughed, the way you do when something is too absurd to be real. Brandon, honey, this is my house. If you and Melissa want to vacation here, we can look at some dates. No, you don't understand, he cut in, impatient. We already booked their flights. They're expecting to stay in the master suite and the main bedrooms. The guest room has a perfectly good ocean view. You'll be fine up there. That easy assumption that I'd just comply left me momentarily speechless. This was the same son I'd put through business school, whose failed restaurant I'd bailed out twice, whose mortgage I'd helped with when his graphic design company nearly folded. Brandon, I said, keeping my voice steady, I bought this house to relax and enjoy my retirement. I'm not running a hotel for Melissa's family. His tone cooled in an instant. It reminded me of his father during our divorce negotiations, smooth, hard, and cruel around the edges. Look, Mom, you've got this huge house all to yourself. It's selfish not to share. And if you don't want to be reasonable, well, I heard there's a very nice assisted living facility just down the coastal highway. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a house fire you can't quite locate yet. My 35-year-old son was essentially telling me to accommodate his in-laws or get used to being abandoned. I see, I said quietly. And what if I refuse? Then we'll have to reconsider how much help you actually need at your age, he said. Living alone in such a big place, managing all that space. Maybe it's too much responsibility for someone in their mid-60s. After I hung up, I sat on my new deck and watched the sun paint the ocean in shades of amber and gold. It should have been healing, but all I could think about was the satisfied smugness in Brandon's voice. He thought he'd cornered me, that I was just another helpless older woman who would cave to emotional blackmail. What Brandon didn't know, and what I'd learned across 3 decades of boardrooms and backstabs, was that the best victories come from letting your opponent think they've already won. The next morning I started preparing for their arrival, but not the way they expected. I woke to car doors slamming and voices cracking the quiet. Apparently, Melissa's family decided to arrive at 7:00 on the dot without a word of warning, because why would the homeowner need a heads up? From my upstairs window, I watched a caravan of rental cars disgorge what looked like a small, disorganized army. Melissa stood in the driveway like a general, pointing toward different entrances and barking orders about luggage distribution. Her parents emerged from the first car, both wearing those aggressively casual vacation outfits that scream, "We're here to be served." What knocked me back wasn't the sight of them. It was how comfortable they all seemed. No hesitation. No glance toward the front door. No knock. They moved like people who'd been told this was their space now. I slipped on my robe and came downstairs, curious to see how they'd handle meeting the woman who actually owned the deed. "Oh," Melissa startled when she saw me, then recovered so fast you'd think she'd rehearsed. "Eleanor, Brandon said you'd moved upstairs already. Good. The master gets the best morning light, and Mom has arthritis, so she needs the ground floor bedroom." Her parents rolled past me without introduction, wheeling suitcases toward my master suite like they were checking into a resort. Melissa's sister Rachel and her husband corralled their 2 teenagers to the second-floor guest rooms, while her brother, Kevin, and his girlfriend claimed the den with the pull-out sofa. "Coffee's in the kitchen," I said mildly. "Help yourselves." "Oh, we brought our own supplies," Melissa chirped, opening my pantry and immediately rearranging my carefully organized shelves. "Mom's on a special diet and the kids are picky. We'll just need you to clear out some refrigerator space." I watched her sweep my groceries into a cardboard box like she was cleaning out an employee's desk. The audacity was nearly impressive. Nearly. "Where would you like me to put these?" I asked, lifting the displaced food. "The garage fridge should be fine. Brandon said you have one out there." Of course he had. Brandon, human inventory spreadsheet. I wondered what else he'd shared during their planning sessions. By noon, my house had been transformed. Pool toys littered the deck. Wet towels sagged over the arms of my antique chairs. The kitchen looked like a hurricane had twirled through it with sticky fingers. Melissa's mother, Patricia, held court at my dining table, complaining loudly about the water pressure in her shower, while her husband critiqued my cable package like he'd been appointed programming czar. "Eleanor," he called, not bothering to look at me, "we're going to need the Wi-Fi password. And do you have any of those little drink umbrellas? The kids are making tropical smoothies." That easy expectation that I would be their concierge took my breath away. I smiled, offered the password, and excused myself to the garage, where I spent the afternoon making phone calls that would change everything. The first was to my attorney, Sarah Chen, who had handled the closing on the house. "Sarah, I need you to pull the deed on the Outer Banks property, confirm the exact legal ownership structure, and any language about management authority." "On it," she said. "You want a copy of the operating agreement, too?" "Please." The second call was to my accountant, Jim, the magician who'd structured the purchase to be tax-savvy. "Walk me through the ownership details again," I said, slowly. The third was to a local investigator I'd used on a couple of messy acquisitions. "Mike, I need a background check run on some house guests," I told him. "Full workup, financial, employment, social media. Yes, I'll pay your rush fee." By dinner time, while Melissa's clan devoured the steaks they'd fished out of my freezer without asking, I had everything I needed. But I wasn't ready to play my cards. Not yet. It's best to let entitled people get comfortable first. They show you all the places to press. That night, I lay in the small upstairs guest room, listening to 11 people enjoy my house below me. I smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring the first surprise. I woke to find my coffee maker blocked by a line of Melissa's relatives, treating my kitchen like a hotel breakfast buffet. Patricia had claimed my entire counter to assemble what looked like a gluten-free, dairy-free, joy-free feast. "Oh, Eleanor," she said without looking up, "we're going to need you to run to the store. Kevin's girlfriend is lactose intolerant, and Rachel's youngest is allergic to literally everything. I made a list." She handed me a 3-page shopping list written in the demanding scroll of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Items like organic coconut milk, the expensive kind, not that watery stuff, and gluten-free bread that doesn't taste like cardboard, good luck, were highlighted in color codes, as if I were an underling who'd missed the memo. The assumption that I'd become their unpaid grocery service was remarkable even by my family's new standards. But instead of arguing, I took the list and grabbed my keys. What they didn't know was that I had my own errands to run. First stop, the hardware store, where I purchased a few items that would be useful later. I've learned there's no situation that can't be improved by a well-placed lock. Next, the local phone company to make a small adjustment to my service plan. Amazing what a temporary change to account permissions can do. Then, a quick chat with my bank about security features on all accounts tied to the property. By the time I got back with their groceries, because I'm nothing if not professional, Melissa's crew had burrowed in deeper. Kevin had rearranged my living room furniture to optimize TV viewing, while Rachel's kids had discovered my art supplies and were creating masterpieces directly on my dining room wall. I wish I were exaggerating. "Oh, good, you're back," Melissa said, not even pretending to help with the bags. "We're planning a big barbecue tomorrow night. About 30 people, Brandon's friends, some locals we've met, a few business contacts. You'll need to pick up steaks, burgers, hot dogs, and all the sides. I texted you the list." 30 people, I repeated evenly. "Sounds like quite a party." "It's going to be amazing," she said. "We're really going to put this place on the map. Brandon said you never entertained much, so it's good to get some real use out of this kitchen." I noticed she'd started moving my personal things out of the common areas, family photos, my books. My mother's antique vase had been relocated to make room for her coastal chic aesthetic. Funny how quickly people turn your home into a set piece for their version of themselves. That evening, while they planned their extravaganza from my deck chairs, I made another round of calls from the garage, this time to old business contacts who owed me favors. Big ones. "Tom, it's Eleanor Sterling," I said when he answered. "Yes, I know I'm retired. I need a small favor. How fast can your catering company turn around a last-minute event? 30 people tomorrow night. Money's no object, but there's a catch." The following morning brought a flurry of activity as Melissa's family prepped for their grand party. They'd invited half the beach community, promising premium steaks and top-shelf liquor at, let me stress, my house. Patricia spent the morning criticizing my kitchen organization while somehow using every flat surface for party prep. Around noon, I heard Brandon in the driveway and went to the window. He'd arrived with even more guests, college friends who'd apparently been promised a weekend at the family beach house. The casual way he distributed my spare keys to people I'd never met was breathtaking. "Mom," he called when he spotted me. "There you are. Hope you're ready for a real party. We've got some important people coming tonight. Networking, you know. This house is perfect for making connections. Important people. My house. His networking." The irony had a lovely bouquet. I spent the afternoon on the deck with a book, watching their preparations with the detached interest of an anthropologist studying a tribe with too many coolers. They'd taken over completely. My peaceful retreat turned into party central, without once asking how I felt about strangers invading my home. Boundaries Wasn't even a concept on their Pinterest boards. Around 5, I excused myself to get ready. If I was going to attend their party, I wanted to look like myself, not the aging background extra they'd cast me as. And I had a few surprises to set in motion. By 6, cars lined my driveway like a luxury dealership showcase. Mercedes, BMWs, Range Rovers. I watched from upstairs as strangers wandered through my garden, helped themselves to my bar, and settled into my furniture like they'd funded the mortgage. Melissa had outdone herself with the decorations. Her version of beach house chic. 30 years of my collected treasures rearranged for her Instagram. My grandmother's quilts were tossed as casual throws. My award plaques tucked away as too corporate. She'd moved my personal photographs to a closet so they wouldn't clutter the aesthetic. The final insult? I watched Brandon give someone a tour, describing the house as family property, mentioning how he was handling all the management decisions now that I was getting on in years. Getting on in years. I was 64, not 94. I chose a simple black dress I'd worn to several hostile takeovers. If you're going to deliver devastating news, it helps to look like you mean it. The party was in full, roaring swing when I came down. Brandon held court on the deck, regaling his audience with stories of acquiring the beach house and his plans to maximize the property's potential. Melissa flitted between clusters like a hostess on a reality show. Impressive confidence for someone who'd never paid a dime toward the mortgage. "Eleanor." Patricia spotted me first, her voice pitched in that tone people reserve for inconvenient older relatives. "There you are, dear. Could you check the appetizers? I think we're running low." Of course. Even at my own party, I was still kitchen staff in their minds. Instead, I walked to the center of the deck and lifted my voice just enough to carry. "Excuse me, everyone. Just a moment." The conversation slowed, then stilled. 30-plus strangers turned to look at the woman they'd been told was just the aging mother who came with the house. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate with us tonight," I said. "It's wonderful to see so many new faces enjoying this beautiful property." Brandon beamed, pleased that his mother had finally embraced her role as gracious hostess to his networking vision. "Before we continue," I added, pulling my phone from my clutch, "I have a quick announcement." That's when the catering truck pulled into the driveway. Not a small, discreet setup. This was Tom Morrison's premier event service. Uniformed staff, a full mobile kitchen, racks of glassware, chrome that gleamed under the porch lights, and an operations lead with a clipboard that meant business. "What's that?" Melissa asked, her hostess smile faltering. "Oh, that's dinner," I said cheerfully. "I thought since we were having such a large party we should do it right. Prime rib, lobster tails, champagne service, the works." I watched Brandon's expression slide from pleased to confused to worried in 10 seconds flat. Premium catering for 30 wasn't cheap, and you could see the math start to itch the back of his brain. "Mom, we already bought steaks," he hissed, stepping toward me. "Don't worry about those," I said lightly. "We'll save them for another time." I turned back to the crowd. "If everyone could give our team a little space, they'll have you seated shortly." Tom approached with his practiced, satisfied smile, the kind service pros wear when someone books their top package with a rush fee. "Miss Sterling, where would you like the champagne station?" "The champagne station?" Brandon's voice cracked. "Right by the pool, Tom," I said. "And make sure everyone gets the good stuff. Dom Perignon, not the house bubbly." The energy shifted instantly. These were people who recognized quality when they heard it, and Dom Perignon isn't backyard barbecue fare. The staff moved with military precision, transforming my deck into an elegant dining space. Linens, real crystal, Silver service, candlelight flickering on glass like starlight had come down to eat with us. Within 30 minutes, what had been a casual cookout turned into a high-end dinner party with a price tag that could make a mortgage payment cry. Mom. Brandon pulled me aside, his networking smile gone brittle around the edges. What is this going to cost? I smiled sweetly. Don't worry, honey. It's all taken care of. What I didn't say was how, exactly, it was being taken care of. That revelation would have its own spotlight later. For now, I was content to watch 30 strangers enjoy a 5-star evening, while my son realized he didn't understand the board he was playing on. Dinner unfolded like a rehearsal dinner for people who put entrepreneur in their bio before they have revenue. Platters rolled out steaming, prime rib bleeding perfectly, lobster tails glistening like pearls pulled straight from the tide. The scent of real butter and garlic drifted across the deck. The ocean answered with a hush. Champagne corks sparked like little fireworks. A violinist, yes, I'd asked Tom to bring one, stitched soft standards into the salt air. You could hear forks pause as people realized this wasn't a popover party. This was an event. I let Brandon see me enjoy it. I laughed with his important people. I toasted the night and said nothing about bills, management, or ownership. I watched Melissa reposition her hostess smile, trying to claim the upgrade as if she'd ordered it herself. I watched Patricia pretend to be unimpressed while pocketing 2 of the monogrammed napkins like she was doing me a favor. You know what I mean? Sometimes you have to let people write their own indictment. As the stars came out, the tide hissed farther down the beach. Candles burned lower. The violinist packed up. I thanked Tom's crew, signed for the service, with the appropriate notations, and wished our guests a lovely night. And then I went upstairs, washed my face, slipped between cool sheets, and slept like a woman who remembered exactly who she was. The morning after sang another tune. I found Brandon and Melissa hunched over their phones at my dining table, whispering into customer service lines, surrounded by the wreckage of last night's luxury. Empty green bottles lined the counter like little soldiers, labels facing out. The catering bill, printed and left intentionally on the island, sat there like a sunburn you can't pretend away. $15,000, Melissa whispered, staring at the invoice like it might spontaneously combust. For one dinner party. Brandon was on his 3rd call, trying to explain why he needed his credit limit raised by exactly $15,000. It wasn't going well. Good morning, I said brightly, using the espresso machine they'd commandeered 3 days ago. How's everyone feeling after the big party? Mom, we need to talk. Brandon's voice had the strained quality of a man watching his financial future circle the drain. About that catering bill? Wasn't it wonderful, I said, tasting the crema and the victory. Everyone raved about the lobster. Tom really outdid himself. We can't afford $15,000 for one dinner, he hissed. I tilted my head. That's strange. I was under the impression you were handling all the management decisions for this property now. At least that's what you told those nice people last night. I watched the color bleed from his face. If you publicly claim authority, you publicly claim the consequences. It's amazing how often grown adults forget the second part. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. But I never actually said, "Oh, but you did." I blew across the coffee. Several people mentioned how impressed they were that someone your age had acquired such a beautiful property and was managing it so professionally. They were particularly interested in your business model, using family assets for networking events, very innovative. At that exact moment, Patricia emerged from my master bedroom wearing my robe and carrying my favorite mug. Eleanor, dear, we'll need fresh towels. and the Wi-Fi is running slow. Can you call someone about that?" Before I could respond, my phone rang. "Eleanor Sterling," I answered, pressing speaker. "Miss Sterling, this is Janet Morrison from Coastal Properties Real Estate. I have some questions about the beach house listing." "Beach house listing?" I said mildly. "I haven't listed any property for sale." "That's odd," she said. "We received an inquiry yesterday from a Brandon Sterling, claiming to represent the owner in a potential sale. He provided detailed information about the property and said he was authorized to handle all real estate decisions." The silence was so complete I could hear the surf through the open window. Brandon went from worried to white-faced panic. Melissa stared at him like he'd sprouted a second head. "I see," I said evenly. "Well, Mr. Sterling is not authorized to represent me in any real estate matters. If someone has been providing information without permission, that's concerning. Should I file a report with local authorities? Impersonating a property owner is serious." Brandon shook his head violently behind the phone, mouthing, "Don't," but I pretended not to notice. "Thank you for calling, Mrs. Morrison. I'll follow up." The line clicked off. The kitchen was so quiet you could hear a thought scurry. "Eleanor, about those towels," Patricia began again, and that's when something in me clicked into place with a clean, satisfying sound. "Get out," I said. "Excuse me?" Her eyebrows flew up. "Get out," I repeated, calm as the tide. "All of you, pack your things and leave my house." "Mom, you can't be serious," Brandon said, his voice pitching higher. "We're family." "Family doesn't impersonate each other to real estate agents," I said. "Family doesn't throw $15,000 parties on someone else's credit. And family certainly doesn't threaten nursing homes when they don't get their way." I walked to the front door, opened it, and let the ocean air into the room where courtesy had died. "You have 2 hours to collect your belongings and leave. If you're not gone by then, I'll call both the police and Mrs. Morrison to file those reports." What happened next would teach them more about family than they'd learned in their entire lives. The exodus began immediately, but not in the tidy fashion you'd expect from people who had treated my home like a resort. Instead, it devolved into a chaotic scramble of accusations, blame-shifting, and desperate negotiations that would have been comical if it hadn't been tragic. Patricia dragged her suitcase from my master suite, muttering about ungrateful hosts. Kevin's girlfriend complained loudly about cutting their vacation short because of my unreasonable demands. Rachel's teenagers actually looked relieved. Apparently, sharing space with that many adults hadn't been their idea of paradise. But it was Brandon's reaction that surprised me most. Instead of apologizing, he doubled down. "You're making a huge mistake, Mom. Do you know who some of those people were last night? I was building valuable business relationships, networks that could benefit the whole family." "The whole family?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the family you threatened to dump in a nursing home if I didn't comply?" Melissa shifted tactics, her voice softening into the manipulative lilt she likely used on wait lists and flight attendants. "Eleanor, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe we can work something out. Split the time. Shared expenses." "Shared expenses?" I almost laughed. "Like the $15,000 you can't afford to pay? Or the groceries I bought for your family's special diets? Maybe the utility bills that tripled when 11 people moved in?" That's when Brandon played what he clearly thought was his ace. "Fine. But you're going to regret this. You think you can live in this huge house alone? At your age? What happens when you fall? When you can't manage the upkeep? You're going to need family, and we won't be there." The threat hung like fog. I could see him thinking he'd found my soft spot, the specter of helplessness and isolation. He really didn't know me at all. "You know what, Brandon?" I said softly. "You're absolutely right. I can't manage this house alone. It's far too much responsibility for someone my age." His expression slipped into smug satisfaction. "So you'll reconsider?" "No," I said, "which is why I sold it." The words dropped into the foyer like a brick into a still pond. Brandon's mouth actually fell open. Melissa froze halfway through folding a beach towel. Patricia gasped from the hallway. "What do you mean, sold it?" Patricia demanded. I walked to my desk and retrieved the folder I'd prepared for this exact moment. "I mean, I sold it yesterday morning. All cash offer, quick closing, very convenient timing." But you can't have sold it," Brandon stammered. "We're staying here. We have plans." "Had plans," I corrected gently. "The new owners take possession next week. Professional property managers from Chicago. Lovely people. They plan to rent to carefully screened families who appreciate peace and quiet." Now, was that the exact truth? Not precisely. What I'd done was transfer the property into an LLC I controlled and sign a management agreement with a high-end vacation rental company. But the effect was the same. Brandon and his entitled in-laws no longer had a foothold in my home, and there was nothing they could do about it. "You can't do this," he said, voice cracking. "This is our family home." "No, Brandon. This was my retirement home. The one you told me I was too old to manage. The one you threatened to take away if I didn't submit." I closed the folder with a satisfying snap. "You were right about one thing, though. I do need family I can count on. I just realized you're not it." The final 20 minutes of their departure were a blur of slamming car doors and muttered threats about lawyers and family loyalty. And then, as the last rental car curved out of my driveway and the quiet returned, my phone rang. "Ms. Sterling," a crisp voice said. "This is David Chen from Outer Banks Property Management. Just confirming the Sterling Beach House is ready for its first rental guests. They arrive tomorrow for a 2-week stay. Payment received in full." I stood at the window and watched the Atlantic flash silver in the afternoon sun. "Yes, Mr. Chen," I said, and I couldn't help the smile in my voice. "Everything's ready. I think you'll find our guests much more appreciative than the last group, because sometimes the best revenge isn't just success, it's profitable success. But if you think that's where the story ends, pull up a chair. The real surprises were only just beginning." The Patterson family arrived right on schedule. A soft-spoken couple from Richmond with 2 well-mannered teenage daughters who asked, before they set a single bag down, if they might have permission to use the pool. The contrast with my prior guests was so stark, it would have been funny if it hadn't been so refreshing. "Mrs. Sterling," Mrs. Patterson said carefully, "we don't want to impose. The management company said you live on site." "I have a small apartment above the garage," I lied easily. What they didn't need to know was that I moved back into my master suite the moment Brandon's convoy disappeared. "Please treat the house as your own. That's what you're paying for." The rental income was substantial, $8,000 for 2 weeks, with bookings solid through the season. Not only had I reclaimed my peace, I'd turned forced hospitality into a real business. Life has a way of rewarding boundaries, you know. 2 quiet mornings later, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in an expensive suit holding what looked like legal documents. Well. "Miss Sterling, I'm Rebecca Walsh of Walsh Henderson and Associates," she said, professional smile at the ready. "I represent your son, Brandon Sterling, in a property dispute." Of course he'd hired a lawyer. I should have expected it. I was only surprised he'd managed to scrape together a retainer given his cash flow issues. "What can I do for you, Ms. Walsh?" I asked, stepping onto the porch so the Pattersons wouldn't hear. "My client believes there were irregularities in the recent property transfer. He's concerned about elder abuse, specifically Financial exploitation of a vulnerable family member. I had to admire the audacity. Even as my temper pricked, Brandon was trying to paint me as legally incompetent after I outmaneuvered his little coup. Classic. When you can't win the facts, attack the person. I see, I said. And what exactly is irregular about a property owner making decisions about her own asset? Well, she said, consulting notes, the sudden sale, isolation from family members, apparent confusion about property management. My client is particularly concerned about the emotional distress you may be experiencing following retirement. Major life transitions can affect judgment. Emotional distress. The narrative snapped into focus. Paint me as a confused older woman having a breakdown. If I hadn't been so angry, I might have applauded the strategy. Miss Walsh, I said kindly, did your client mention the $15,000 catering bill he authorized at my property? Or his unauthorized communications with real estate agents claiming to represent me? Her composure flickered. I'm sure there are explanations. Oh, I'm sure, I said. And I'm also sure this conversation will be more productive with my attorney present. She specializes in elder law, particularly cases involving financial exploitation by adult children. That took the color right out of her cheeks. Perhaps we can arrange a meeting, she said, gathering herself. Perhaps we can, I said. Sarah Chen's office will contact you. After Ms. Walsh left, I called Sarah. I was wondering when I'd hear from you, Sarah said. Brandon's attorney called yesterday, fishing about capacity. I told her that in 30 years of representing you, I've never met a sharper businesswoman. Thank you, I said. I suspect this gets worse before it gets better. Probably, she said, but you have documentation for everything. If he pushes the incompetence angle, it's going to backfire spectacularly. I wanted to believe her, but experience has taught me that people who tell on themselves rarely stop at one confession. 3 days later, Mrs. Patterson knocked, worry etched across her face. Mrs. Sterling, I hope you don't mind my mentioning this, but a young man came by yesterday claiming to be your son. He wanted to know our rental rate and booking schedule. He seemed determined. My blood ran cold. Brandon was probing for angles, zoning, licensing, any thread he could pull. What did you tell him? I asked. Nothing, she said. It didn't seem appropriate to discuss your business with someone we hadn't been introduced to, family or not, but he mentioned health concerns and your ability to manage such a large property. Planting seeds of doubt with my tenants. Textbook Brandon. If he could make them nervous enough to complain to the management company or the county, he could hit me where it hurt. Thank you for handling that, I said. If he returns, please call the police. I haven't authorized anyone to inquire about my property. That evening, my phone lit up. Mom, we need to talk, Brandon said, satisfaction creeping into his voice. I've been researching your recent decisions. Looks like you're running an unlicensed bed and breakfast in a residential zone. Do you know what the zoning violations alone could cost you? The liability? If something happens to a tenant, he'd found his new play, threaten me with regulators. Interesting theory, I said, keeping my tone bored. Did your research also discover the property is zoned for short-term rental and fully licensed through Dare County, or that my insurance specifically covers vacation rentals? Silence. I could almost hear him reloading. You can't keep me away from family property forever, he said. It's not family property, Brandon. It never was. It's mine. I purchased it with my money, and I will dispose of it as I choose. We'll see, he said, and hung up. Empty bravado makes a distinct sound when it lands. It thuds. 2 mornings later, a white van pulled into my drive. The logo read, Coastal Care Services. A woman in scrubs stepped out with a clipboard. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm Janet Torres with Adult Protective Services. We received a report of potential self-neglect and possible exploitation by caregivers. I need to conduct a welfare check." For a moment, the horizon doubled. My son had reported me to APS. He'd used the state to threaten his own mother. "Of course," I said, though my hands shook. "Please come in. You'll want to see living conditions and speak with me privately." The inspection was thorough and professional. Janet checked the fridge for adequate food, examined my medications, assessed my hygiene and mental status, reviewed my financial arrangements. What she found was a well-maintained home, a competent older woman, and clean rental documentation. "Mrs. Sterling," she said gently, "the person who filed this report claimed you were being isolated by caregivers and pressured into financial decisions you didn't understand." "The person who filed this report is my son," I said evenly, "who is angry that I refused to let him use my home as a free vacation for his in-laws. When I declined, he threatened to put me in a nursing home. Now he's decided to involve the government." Janet's expression hardened into something like protectiveness. "Are you saying the report was malicious?" "I'm saying the report was filed by someone who views my independence as an inconvenience." She closed her folder. "I'll note the case as unfounded. If you experience further harassment, please call me directly." When the door closed behind her, I stood very still. There's a point in every battle where you stop trying to keep the peace and start defending it. I'd reached mine. "Mike," I said into the phone, "remember that background check? I need you to go deeper. Full financial forensics, employment verification, legal history, the works." "How deep?" he asked. "I want to know what they had for breakfast last Tuesday." 2 days later, a thick manila envelope landed on my kitchen table. I brewed coffee, sat down, and opened it like a surgeon. The findings were worse than I'd imagined. Brandon's design business was 3 months behind on rent and facing eviction. Melissa had maxed out 4 credit cards to float their lifestyle, including the beach vacation in my house. Most chilling, they'd recently applied for a home equity loan using projected inheritance from my estate as collateral. They were counting on my death or my incapacity to solve their problems. But the bomb was on page 12. 6 months ago, Brandon had visited 3 elder law attorneys about conservatorship proceedings for a parent with declining judgment. He'd been planning the takeover long before our beach house fight. While I'd been gleefully signing closing documents, my son had been researching how to have me declared incompetent. I called Sarah. "Prepare documents," I said, voice steady. "Restraining order, elder abuse charges, and explore a civil suit for attempted financial exploitation." "Eleanor," Sarah said carefully, "family court battles get ugly." "He called Adult Protective Services on me," I said. "He tried to recruit the government to declare me unfit. This stopped being a family dispute when he decided to destroy my reputation to get my money." That afternoon, while the Pattersons read in the shade and the ocean breathed in and out like a living thing, I implemented Phase 2. I've learned the most effective way to stop an adversary is to remove the reason they're fighting. First, I called Brandon's landlord, an old contact from my business days. I asked a few strategic questions. Yes, Brandon was in arrears. Yes, he'd been promising family funds were on the way. No, the landlord hadn't seen a dime. Second, the credit card companies. 30 years of corporate finance teaches you exactly how to phrase concerns about unusual spending without making claims you can't prove. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I simply ensured that the appropriate reviews would be triggered. By evening, Brandon's world began to unwind with the slow, purposeful grace of a controlled demolition. At 6:47 p.m., my phone rang. What did you do? His voice was raw. I protected myself, I said, and I made sure the relevant authorities have accurate information about your activities. You destroyed my business, my credit, everything. I documented your behavior for legal proceedings, I said. If your business and credit are destroyed, perhaps examine the choices that led there. You can't do this to family, he said. You're right, I said softly. You can't threaten them, exploit them, or try to have them declared incompetent for your financial benefit. I'm glad we agree. Silence stretched until I heard something I hadn't heard since he was little. Fear. What do you want? Finally. I want you to disappear from my life, I said. No more phone calls, no legal threats, no showing up at my property or harassing my tenants. In exchange, I won't press charges for the APS fraud or the unauthorized expenses you can't cover. And if I don't, then we'll let a judge decide whether your actions constitute elder abuse, I said. You can explain why you thought threatening your mother with a nursing home was appropriate leverage for a free vacation. He inhaled through his nose, calculating. I need time to think. You have 24 hours, I said. After that, Sarah files, and this becomes part of the public record. I hung up and stood in the twilight, listening to the steady wash of the ocean. I knew him well enough to predict the next move. He wouldn't accept defeat gracefully. He'd try one last gambit. 18 hours later, Mrs. Patterson knocked again, pale. I'm so sorry to bother you, she said, but we've had some disturbing calls. Someone claiming to be your son has contacted our employers, our neighbors, even our daughter's school. He's saying we're staying in an unsafe situation with an unstable elderly woman. Strategically brilliant. He couldn't risk attacking me directly without criminal exposure, so he went after my tenants. If he could spook them and spread the word that my place was dangerous, he could cripple my rental business and push me toward the dependency he'd planned. What exactly is he saying? I asked. That you're mentally ill, that you're making irrational decisions, that we're in danger here. He even suggested we might be enabling elder abuse by paying rent to someone who's clearly incompetent. She handed me a notebook where she documented the calls, times, numbers, quotes. Bless that woman. She'd just created a prosecutor's dream. Mrs. Sterling, she said, voice shaking, we don't want to be involved in family disputes, but this is affecting our jobs and our girls' school. We may need to cut our vacation short. Of course they would. Brandon was counting on decent people refusing to be collateral damage. Give me the evening, I said. I'll handle it. I called Mike first. I need immediate documentation of harassment, phone records, social accounts, everything. Build me a clean timeline. Then Sarah. File everything, I said. Restraining order, elder abuse charges, harassment, criminal and civil remedies. Finally, I dialed Brandon. We're meeting today, I said, in Sarah's office. Mom, maybe we both need to cool down. Today or tomorrow, I said. Otherwise, you'll explain to a judge why you've been harassing innocent families and interfering with legitimate business. Your call. 2 hours later, Brandon sat across from me at the polished conference table in Sarah's office, looking like a man who just realized the water was, in fact, over his head. Gone was the smug confidence. What sat there was frightened, desperate, and cornered. Before we begin, Sarah said, spreading documents on the table, let's be clear about the legal exposure here. The papers told an ugly story. Attempted financial exploitation, harassment, false reports to government agencies, and witness statements from multiple parties. Any prosecutor would salivate. Brandon, I said quietly, I want you to understand something. 6 months ago, when you started researching conservatorship proceedings, you made a choice. You decided to treat your mother as an obstacle, not as family. Everything since then followed from that, his face drained. How did you— I know about the attorney consultations, I said. I know about using my projected inheritance as collateral. I know more than you think. Sarah slid another document across. Comprehensive financial audit, she said. Your pattern of expenditures, the assumption of inheritance, the timing of conflicts. It paints a very clear motive. He looked at the pages like they were a sentence. In many ways, they were. What do you want? He whispered. I want the truth, I said, meeting his eyes, really meeting them, for the first time in months. When did you start planning to take control of my finances? When did you decide I was more valuable to you incapacitated than independent? And I need to know, did you ever love me as a mother? Or have I always been a retirement plan? Silence widened, the kind that rearranges a family. He reached for the water, sipped, stared at his hands. It started after Dad died, he said at last, voice thin. My ex-husband, Harold, had died 3 years earlier, leaving Brandon with a set of opinions wrapped up as instructions. Dad always said you were too independent for your own good, that women your age needed guidance. When he died, he made me promise to take care of you when the time came. The words landed heavy. Harold controlling from beyond the grave. Of course he had. When you sold the company, Brandon continued, I panicked. I thought you'd make stupid decisions. The beach house seemed like such a waste, all that space for one person. So you decided to take over, I said. I decided to provide guidance, he insisted, voice fraying. But you wouldn't listen. You treated me like I was stealing from you. Sarah's face stayed neutral, but I saw the disgust in her eyes. She'd seen this pattern before, adult children calling exploitation protection. When did protecting me become taking over my house and threatening me with nursing homes? I asked. When you wouldn't be reasonable, he said, and the mask finally slipped. The anger, the entitlement, they were all right there. You have a huge house you don't need, money you can't possibly spend, and you were wasting it, sitting there alone. Alone, I repeated. Or not providing a free resort for your in-laws while you used my property for networking. He flinched. Everything I did was for the family, he said. The connections I was making. Including the part where you researched having me declared incompetent? I asked. His face cycled through denial, defiance, and finally, a tired, defeated acceptance. The lawyers said it was the only way to protect you, he muttered, that someone your age shouldn't be making major financial decisions alone. Did any lawyers say I showed signs of cognitive decline? Sarah asked, finally letting steel into her voice. Or were you shopping for an opinion that blessed what you already wanted? His silence was an answer. I stood. Suddenly I was very, very tired. This was the boy whose scraped knees I'd kissed, whose lunches I'd packed, whose failures I'd quietly funded. And he had been planning, carefully, to erase my independence and call it love. Proceed with all remedies, I told Sarah. Restraining orders, harassment charges, a comprehensive legal barrier. Mom, wait, he said. You're not my son anymore, Brandon, I said, and the words were a mercy and a blade. Sons don't try to have their mothers declared incompetent. Sons don't call APS to weaponize the state. Sons don't dangle nursing homes like a leash. I paused at the door. You want the ironic part? If you'd simply asked to visit the beach house occasionally, I would have said yes. If you'd been respectful, grateful, kind, eventually I would have shared everything. But you couldn't wait for generosity. You had to take control. He crumpled. I can change. We can fix this." "No," I said. "Trust. Once broken like this doesn't go back. You've shown me who you are, and I believe you." "One more thing," I added. "That $15,000 catering bill you authorized? I've decided not to pay it. Since you publicly claimed management authority, the company will be pursuing you for payment. I'm sure your lawyer can explain unauthorized contracts." I left him there with the papers. 6 months later, the Patterson family sent me a wedding invitation. Their oldest was getting married. They asked if they could hold the ceremony at that beautiful, peaceful beach house. The rental income from weddings turned out to be even better than vacations. I framed the thank you note they sent after. It sits where my award plaques used to hang. Different trophies, better meaning. Brandon sent one last letter through his attorney, a formal apology requesting visitation rights and suggesting family counseling. Sarah sent the response I approved. "Miss Sterling has moved on with her life and wishes you well in yours." Which was the truth. I'd moved on to a life where my independence was respected. My decisions were mine, and family meant the people who loved me, not the ones who tried to control me. Some mornings I sit on the deck as the Atlantic pinks with dawn. I think about the boy I raised. I feel a twinge of grief for the son I lost. But mostly, I feel gratitude for the woman I refused to lose, myself. The beach house became everything I dreamed, a place of peace, beauty, and genuine hospitality. Just not for the family I'd originally imagined. Sometimes the best family is the one you gather along the way. And sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone else's worst impulses, even when that someone is your own child, especially then. If you've been through something like this, I say sometimes at the end of an episode, you're not alone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. Thank you for listening. And if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Boundaries are not punishments. They're lifelines. Tie yours tight.